The Clowntown Chronicle, a show that gives you a laugh, a romp through the wilderness. And
well, you and me, actually, as far as that goes, you and me kind of had the opposite trajectory. So I went from running a history podcast for 6 years to running a news podcast. Right. And now you're doing history. And I couldn't be more excited, frankly.
Mate, the news, the advantage of news obviously is that it's an infinite fountain, right? Like there's always, you never have to sort of think of content because there's always something happening, right? But the downside is, particularly in the UK, everything is fucking terrible. Like it's just, it's like you're falling down a flight of stairs, right? And there's like a fucking acid pit at the bottom, right? And your weekly job is to meticulously document every bump and scrape. You know, like, oh, we're about to go over another stair. Only 5 more stairs to go until the acid trap.
Well, effort posting is the long game, my dude. Like history takes a while. You'll eventually get to some place where you'll have some listeners, and then like 10 years later, people will be like, "Holy shit, you were right." Yeah. So
well, the problem with predicting like current events and stuff, and I am pretty good on that. I mean, I'm not fucking Nostradamus or something, is that like all of my predictions are bad. Like bad stuff is gonna happen. Like yeah, I was right again. I do like doing the voices though. I had a lot of fun doing like we would have heard my like Trump impression if you.
Oh, it's fantastic. Are you kidding?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so you want to talk about
I have a ton of questions, all kinds of stuff, and I also have a series of 30 clips of James Lindsay. I'm just kidding.
It's kind of weird. I have, in this weird way, wound up doing a degree on James Lindsay. It's like, gee, what are you going to do when you grow up? Well, I'm going to know all of this stuff about this complete retard because, right, like that's knowledge is a beautiful thing. But you know what it was? It was because I was so into political science, and I just see him like mangling stuff like really badly all the time. So I guess there's that like sort of weird thing that one of the ways to like learn about a thing is to watch someone else doing it badly. And sort of learn from their mistakes, if that makes sense, right? Like, and you can, it kind of makes you like sharpen up your opinions and sort of, find a way to sort of like really sort of put them forward like better if you can see someone making like sort of a hack job of it, you know what I mean, right? Especially if they're coming after you and all of your, political fellow travelers. But anyway, let's move on to something else.
Of course. Everybody, welcome to the Clowntown Chronicle, a very special interview episode that's already more fun than I've had in a while. We are talking to Mr. Newsfist. Is that how you'd like me to refer to you, sir?
That's right. You can call me Newsfist or Mr. Fist or, that weird guy who does the history. I'm pretty easy. I am Newsfist. In case anyone is wondering about how I came up with that name. I literally thought it up in like 5 minutes, like 7 years ago in the middle of COVID. I started like doing like a podcast on Odyssey just to like, stay sane. I was like, oh, I'll call it Newsfist. That sounds stupid. And now it's like 6 years later, I'm still using it. So I'm stuck with it now. Right. So, obviously as a good right winger, I probably should have called myself like Caesar Gerontarion, right? Or the mythic English wanderer, or 40K communist destroyer. but no. So,
I'm getting flashbacks to the Minneapolis thing of late because, of course, my strongest podcast days were, like many others, during 2020 and then the Summer of Love, and then everything just kept centering around that place. And I'm like, I did a whole episode on my history podcast that was about propaganda throughout history and brainwashing. And because it dovetailed nicely with my experience. So like just for your information, my background is in mass communications and film.
Really?
And yeah, so I come at all of these historical stories and the stuff we cover from the perspective of somebody who did work in television. Not for very long. They didn't let me stay.
Well, you see, you didn't have the right opinions.
You're right.
I can already tell that you don't have the right opinions to participate. As we say in the UK, people such as yourself have no place in our society. They never sort of elucidate what other place you're supposed to go through. It's quite sinister, right? They just say, well, you have no place in our society. And I'm like, well, what is this other place? And they're like, well, it's obviously it's a veiled threat. You should change, or, possibly go somewhere you can write a nice self-criticism session, somewhere where you can like really concentrate, right, on your failings as a human being. Maybe some kind of a camp, right? Like that's a thing, a camp where you can concentrate. I feel like I've heard that somewhere before.
I don't know here, buddy, but I might just be a dumb, hard-working American. But that there sounds like you're talking about the what do they call it there? Kindergarten. That's right.
That's right. So yeah, a kindergarten for battle. We take all them bad people and we stick them in it's like a kindergarten with guards and in pepper spray and sonic weapons and DEI training. It'll be delightful.
I think I put it so like I don't have many followers on X. I've never been very good at it. But I think I put up my favorite post I've ever put up today. Did you see Tim Walz's a statement of late?
Oh my God. I mean, I know he's crashing out.
Yeah.
I was watching last night. See, the thing is, right, I'm actually getting PTSD from Black Lives Matter as well, because although it wasn't a big thing in the UK, right? Actually, a little aside, let me tell you a really funny little story. Okay. So Black Lives Matter kicks off in the US, right? And of course, everywhere in the world, else in the West has to have their own little version. Why? Don't know. Well, communism, obviously, I do know. But anyway, so the head of BLM UK was this lady, girl, young woman called Sasha Johnson, right? And, she had the shaved head and like the beret and like the communist thing and stuff. And she's like, we are gonna, take the country back, or, some fucking bullshit. Anyway, the protests like kick off. It's sort of very similar to what's going down in the US. They don't start like torching anything, but they're fighting with the police. The police are sort of being kind of like a bit hands off because there's now a long history in the UK of whenever the police sort of wind up, well, anyone black gets involved and gets killed, it's always framed exactly in the same way, right? It doesn't matter what they were doing, right? Like, he was sitting up a mobile rocket launcher in the middle of the road, and the police just innocently like shot him. Like, it's so fucking retarded. Anyway, the whole movement in the UK gets decapitated when Sasha Johnson catches like a stray bullet. She's at a block party at 4 a.m., right, with her children at home, right, mother of the year, right, and someone does a drive-by on the party and she catches a stray round to the dome and winds up as a vegetable, right? Like, it's so normally, like, I wouldn't, I try and have like limits on my schadenfreude, okay, right? But given that, this person would have quite happily like led a revolutionary movement that would have like dispossessed like every single white person from like anything to do with, the UK. Not that the ruling class isn't doing that already, but like a bit faster. So I watched all of the BLM stuff happen sort of, on live streams and stuff. And I could immediately see it was a very significant event. Right. I'm talking to other people in the UK and they're like, oh, it's nothing. I'm like, no. This is big, right? This is a very significant event. This is bigger than the LA riots, right? There's like more institutional support. They ban the N-word with extreme prejudice, right? Why, shut the fuck up. That's why, right? Like it's our word now. But we invented it so we could call you it. I never understood how exactly that worked, you know? Wait, what was I going with that? Oh, I went off on a tangent. Now I can't fucking remember. Anyway, I was just, yeah.
You were talking about having PTSD about 2020 and COVID and BLM. I think we all have a little bit of that. I get a headache sometimes just thinking about it, because I mean it was like some kind of did you ever I don't know if you play video games. Do you play video games?
Yeah.
You ever play Control?
Yes.
Okay. It was like the
I did.
It was like the frickin' hiss.
Yeah.
It was like all the normies around me got caught on this frequency and just like froze. Maybe not like physically froze, but they got frozen. It was like the concrete hardened around this narrative that we were going to live in for the next couple of decades. It was hard to watch.
My streaming co-host on Fridays, Rhetorically Defective, he calls it quarantine race war. I think that kind of, I just remember that so vividly, that bit where like, they're like, everyone's in lockdown now, but if you want to go and protest for BLM, that's fine, because that won't spread the disease. That was a real thing that happened. It happened in the UK as well. They're like, if you want, because they were still having fucking BLM, like, protests for like the idiots,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh, no, it won't spread the disease. I'm just like, oh my God.
I know.
Like,
I know. It was, and that's what I'm talking about. It was all this contradictory information. Everybody's fighting all the time. And to me, I'm just sitting there like, how do people just keep these things in their heads without exploding? And one of the things that you covered, I don't remember if it was with Rhetorically Defective or if it was on your own show or something like that, but I think you guys did a segment on the administrative state around Christmas. Something like that, where you played this ad or something about like how Santa was being cleared for takeoff by the government.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That was ridiculous. But it speaks to something that I did want to ask you about, which is related to this post about Tim Walz. So what you said on there was, I hate the administrative state. And to me, what I heard was, I hate being talked to like I'm 3. So this is the statement from Tim Walz. He says, he puts this out on Twitter, just a picture with the text on top of it. It goes, I am making a direct appeal to the president. Let's turn the temperature down. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are. And an appeal to Minnesotans. I know this is scary. We must speak out loudly, urgently, but also peacefully. We cannot fan the flames of chaos. That's what he wants. And I just said, barricaded kindergarten teacher is a weird tone. Because isn't that what it feels like a little bit? Like there's like this kindergarten teacher, the way that I don't want to just, yes, maybe to speak very broadly, but lefties expect to be talked to like they're 3.
Okay, so that thing by Walz, right, is classic distilled leftist political speech, right? You could train a large language model on that. Okay, right. Like it's because the way that language works is it's very much like a large language model. You saw it sort of like during peak woke, right? Like, because I was covering this like so much, I actually sort of like learned to speak, I don't know what you call it, sort of doggerel LLM lefty, right? And all you really do is you just join words with other words. It doesn't really sort of mean anything. Okay. So what's happening at the moment is that the program on the left is always to use liminal violence, liminal force. Okay, right? So they don't want to use sort of like overt force, because their great weakness is in fact overt force, as we are seeing now, right? If you bring an army in, if you bring in special forces, if you bring in like the door kickers, the shit kickers, right? They crumble. Okay. So their goal always is to push harassment and small violence right up to the limit. And then when the fascists, right, who's like anyone who opposes their agenda essentially is a fascist at this point, right? The word has lost all meaning. Whenever they respond with force, you hold that up and you be like, see, he's a good boy. He didn't do nothing. Like that woman that was shot by ICE, the first one, Renee Good. Okay. So she was part of an activist group that was deliberately going around tailing ICE, blocking their cars, blocking traffic, right? This is a sort of what you would call a distributed civilian intelligence militia, essentially, right? Very, very fifth generation warfare, by the way, this, right? Because these people that are attacking ICE, they are essentially like a quasi military force, right? If you think about it, right? They might not be armed, but unarmed, militias using sort of blocking tactics can be very effective. Look at the French Revolution, okay? Mm-hmm. Everyone's always looking at the French Revolution. The French Revolution essentially never fucking ended, right? They just keep using these tactics again and again and again and again. And the hope is that when the soldiers line up and start shooting people, as happened in the French Revolution, everyone gets pissed off and they've got enough people and they storm the palace, and then they can kill off all the royals, or I don't know, flood the country with infinity Bomalians, or whatever fucking like crazy utopia they've got going on. So what Walls is basically saying is we are not comfortable in the realm of actual violence, right? You've got Antifa, you've got the Black Bloc, right? And and they can be quite violent, but most of their violence is sort of terrorism in the sort of ground game sense. Okay, right? So they generally, sometimes they go after like political targets, like when they attacked the mayor of Portland. What the fuck was that guy's name? That like massive
I don't remember.
I'm not sure if I can swear on this podcast. That massive Nancy boy who courted Antifa, right? He's like, oh, Antifa, like awesome. And then shock horror, 6 weeks later, they're firebombing his apartment because, there is no spoon long enough to dine with that kind of a devil. Okay, right? So what they do is they do like the protests, they like bash random people, they set fires, okay? But they don't show up 5 deep, all armed with assault rifles and like, do sort of like proper military tactics. Do you get what I'm saying, right? Mm-hmm. So what Walls is saying is that ICE is driving them out of their comfort zone because they are winning. And the reason that ICE is winning is because they have a massive preponderance of force. I believe there's like 10,000 ICE in Minneapolis at the moment to 3,000 Minneapolis PD, and I don't know how many diehard Antifa. Okay, right? So they're outgunned, they're outmatched. I keep hearing rumors that MPD officers are defecting to ICE because the money's better. They're not likely to get like sued because they looked sideways at a minority. I would expect actually that quite a few people from MPD and other police departments will just quit and join on. I mean, this is what they wanted, right? They wanted to defund the police. They wanted to make like policing really, really hard. They wanted to put a hostile legal environment in for their police to make it impossible for them to do their job. But they weren't, to go back to my earlier point about, you have no place in this society, right? This is one of the fundamental errors they seem to like make. They exclude people from these structures and they just leave all this human talent essentially just lying around. And then as soon as some other group comes along and says, yeah, all those like writers, actors, game developers, computer artists, political commentators, police, intelligence people, policy people, all of those people that you have excluded, right? We're going to pick them all up. We're going to form a counter elite and we are going to use actual force, because I hate to say it and people might not like this, but it is true. The only way to defeat these lefty bags of poop is through actual force, organized force. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons why they call anything that could defeat them fascism, because they realize at an instinctual level that their greatest enemy is an organized force that pushes back. Do you see what I'm saying? Right?
Of course.
As opposed, sorry.
Well, let me add something actually, because it does remind me of Munster, and I swear to God, I'm not just trying to stretch this connection, but it does remind me of Munster, because those people in that story, which is the Anabaptists took over a city and behaved so poorly, they had to wall them in. Like, put another wall around the city and then just let themselves tucker themselves out.
Well, I mean, siege warfare was kind of like a staple of that period.
Perfect.
Though, right?
Yes.
Like, if you were trying to take a city, because the cities were so well fortified, and you would lose so many soldiers trying to effect an entry. And this is still true, by the way, right? Like, if you're like a soldier, like a group of soldiers trying to take like a fortified building, you might lose like half your people in the attempt if the defenders have had like a long enough time. So generally what they do is, I mean, this has been true since the Romans. They just build like trenches and walls and they just starve you out, right? Mm-hmm. And it takes a while, but you don't lose as many men.
Right. There was, of course, we acted it out on We Talk About Dead People is probably one of my favorite little sketches we ever did, but the charge of the elder John, or Jan, however you want to pronounce it. Do you remember that bit of the story?
Oh, was that when they tried to like break out? I didn't cover the actual military action as much. For me, what was really fascinating was just all the weird shit they did to the population.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just how much it echoed modern 20th century communist movements. Right. I mean, I'm obviously I'm not the first person to make this correlation. Vogelin famously did, as did Shafarevich, basically sort of like, saying, communism isn't a new thing, really. Both of those authors tied it to Gnosticism. I think you could make a better argument tying it to Judaism and Lurian Kabbalah personally, because although there is a variation of Gnosticism, technically you're supposed to escape the world, right? The idea of repairing the world is much more a sort of Lurian Kabbalistic concept that you see in modern Judaism now, with the idea of the Tikkun Olam, right? You repair the world, right? The kingdom of heaven will be constructed on earth, right? Or there are tons of different versions of this belief, right? Jesus will come back in his little wooden bus, and he will, I don't know, ... profit. But a crucial part of the way these things work is that human agency is involved, right? So this isn't a Christian idea fundamentally. This is a Jewish idea, right? The idea that what humans do on earth will influence the timing of the coming of the Messiah, right? The actual Christians don't believe this, right? In Christianity, it's no man knows the day or the hour. When Jesus is going to come back, he'll come back, right? Like, you should be attentive, but nothing that you can do on earth, right, will change the time of his coming by 1 second, okay? 1 iota, okay? The Jewish conception is very different. The Jewish conception is that the Messiah will return when we have created the conditions for his return. And that's why, in a way, it's a much more sort of dangerous mix, because if you get a whole bunch of people believing that, they can start doing like a whole mess of like crazy stuff. I believe the Anabaptists were talking about, I'm sure they were talking a bit about Jesus returning. I think they were basically saying that the Munster was going to be the Anabaptist city, right? And like, right, once they had gathered all the Anabaptists in like Munster, Jesus would come back, right?
Yep.
That's a Jewish idea as well.
It's right? Well, I'll let you keep going. I just want to point out that is actually an extremely common theme throughout American history. What with the Mormons? There was one that you might find funny. Have you ever heard of the public universal friend?
No.
Look that up. Look that shit up right now. I'm telling you. The public universal friend is one of the weirdest things I've ever read, and it involves gender ideology, it involves messianism, it involves mysticism, and it involves spiritualism. The Americans were on some shit, is all I'm saying, man. But speaking as an American.
There was a guy who named himself the public universal friend.
Guy, read further.
Shunned both birth name and all pronouns. In androgynous clothes, the friend preached throughout the northeastern United States, attracting many followers who became the Society of Universal Friends. Quakers. Fucking Quakers, mate. Right, yeah. Okay, right. Like that makes sense. I mean, the thing is that you've got to Judaism and Christianity have woven themselves sort of together like a number of different times, right? And the early Christian church was a lot about like trying to stop that happening, right? St. Paul quite famously was very, very, against people he called the Judaizers, right? Who were basically sort of trying to blend Judaism back into Christianity. John Chrysostom quite famously, wrote a very, very spicy, was it a homily? Adversus Judaeus. He was not a fan, right? But these ideas, like that, that you can create like heaven on earth, that you can influence the coming of the Messiah, and also like sort of the communist ideas. I mean, they're not. I mean, I see people quote like these certain passages from the Bible where they say like, Jesus says like, oh, you want to be you want to live a life of poverty and no. But it's not really, I don't know, it's not really the early church. That's more a sort of like Protestant aesthetic thing. I mean, obviously the monks do it, right? I guess the thing about Christianity is that because a lot of what Jesus said was kind of vague, right? Like, it's not like the Old Testament where you got like books like Deuteronomy, where it's like literally a whole Jewish legal system, like sort of like laid down, right? Like Christ was much more sort of vibe coded in a way, right? Because he was trying to push back against being ruled by the Pharisees, and the Pharisees essentially ruled through excessive legalism, right? So, there are like billions of laws and, they knew how to interpret it. And, the basic upshot is that, oh, yes, we live by the law. But in actual function, what happens is if you're part of like the right family, you can do whatever the hell you want, right? You can take from whomever you want. You have like a complete sort of like abandoned underclass that is like totally brutalized. But at the same time, this religious aristocracy promote themselves as like the most noble, the most efficacious, the most law following. I mean, dude, fucking King Herod, right? When he heard some prophecy about like Jesus coming, ordered that every Gentile child under the age of 2 years old was to be killed. Every male Gentile child was to be killed, right? So he just sent all of his soldiers out. We're just going to kill all male children under 2 years. Like that's the kind of society, right, that Jesus was sort of like born into. Obviously, the Romans were occupying Jerusalem at the time, but if the Romans hadn't been around, that's the kind of shit that they would be under. So I think the lack of these sort of precise legalisms in the gospel is an attempt to push back against Pharisaic legalism. My theory actually on this is that the best way to understand Christianity actually as a movement, as a whole, as a religion, is an attempt to get out from under Pharisaic Judaism. And that's why this because one sort of birthed the other, but one is a reaction to the other, you get these sort of weird currents sort of, sweeping back in, as you see with like Christian Zionism and stuff. But they're not very easy bedfellows. They're like oil and water. Eventually they separate out. Sorry, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I don't know how the fuck we got onto
I totally love this. This is fantastic. I know me, when I get on a show, I can be as autistic as you please. But this is my kind of, I love this kind of thing, because this is something that we've been trying to communicate with some of our deep dives on the show. We really got on board the, oh God, why can't I think of it? It's not Zionism. It's John Nelson Darby. Is that
dispensationalism?
Dispensationalism. We got on that right before Tucker Carlson did.
Yep.
And I was like, Dad, you got to listen to our presentation on dispensationalism. And he's like, okay. And I don't even know if he did, but a few weeks later, he was like, Tucker Carlson was talking about this thing called dispensationalism. I'm like,
yep.
I love you, Dad. You needed to hear it from him. I get it, but it's already out there. And a lot of my friends over here have also come to understand that dispensationalism is not equal to Christianity. And when you look at it, vibe coding isn't exactly the wrong word at all. I would say that that's pretty close to what Christianity is. And I think that's why it's like oil and water. Like you said, it's trying to get out from under this Pharisaical legalism that was causing things like what you mentioned with King Herod. It's this,
let's contrast the two. Okay. Legalism by definition and Judaism is a reverence for the law, right? The law itself is the holy thing, not the outcome of the law, but the law itself. Now, most Western whites, right, instinctively believe this is something they generally haven't sort of expressed in these terms, right? But this is what I've noticed. They believe that the purpose of a law is to ensure a good outcome, right? Not the law itself should be worshipped. Now, this is like a small but very fundamental difference. And to circle back to what we're talking about the left, right? The left do this all the fucking time. They worship the law. Well, I mean, when it does good things for them, like obviously, right? So they completely abandon the idea. So, okay, like for instance, why do we have a law against murder? Okay, because it's bad for society, right? It's bad for the people who are murdered. You don't want to let like murderers just like run around, keep killing people, right? Because one of the things that is highly, highly underappreciated amongst midwits, right, is that if you take a bell curve and you start looking at like the big, like the tail ends of the distribution, like the proper like 1 in a million, 1 in 100,000 people, right? They could murder a person like every couple of days, right? If they really got going, right? Like imagine you had like, I don't know, fucking Son of Sam or who's some other fucking famous American serial killer, right? Like one of those guys. Like imagine they were just, never caught, or every single time they got caught, they would just like let go. Okay, right? And if they got up a proper head of steam, okay, they could kill a person every couple of days, right? So that's like what? Let's say 150 people a year, 10, 15 years, it's like 1,500 people. And for every single person that they kill, right, it's not just that person who dies, right? Their family is impacted, the people that stumble across the corpse, a general climate of fear. And that's just one person who is uncontrolled. So the point of these laws is to make a better society, right? Under legalism, the point of the law becomes completely lost. And you see this in Judaism and also in Islam, by the way, because Islam is also highly legalistically totalitarian in that sort of sense, right? So on Judaism, like obviously not all Jews are like this hardcore, but you do see them out there if you want to be that way, right? There's a law for like, how you go to the toilet. There's a law for how you go through a door. There's a law about like, how you brush your teeth. And in the Bible, right, you see this all the time. Jesus, he'll be like traveling around and there'll be some like poor, like just wretched soul, okay, completely abandoned by society, right? There's a story where he goes up to there's like a series of pools outside the gate. I think it's Jerusalem. I'm not a biblical scholar. Good thing I go to church. And there's this place called Bethesda. Okay, right, where there are these like healing pools, and there's just like a bunch of people who are just basically like left to like rot. They've got like palsy. They're all like diseased. They're all like fucked up, and they're like their one hope is that apparently if you lie in this pool and like on a certain day, right, the wind moves across the pool and you'll be healed. Okay. And so Jesus comes along and he like heals one of these guys. And the Pharisees, instead of being like, wow, that's amazing, could you heal more people? Right. Their first thought is, you healed on the Sabbath. So you see what I'm getting at, right? Like it's you disobeyed the law. The actual purpose of the law is just completely forgotten. Right. Why do we do these things? Because Hashem told us to do them. Why? Doesn't matter why. Now, the Christian conception of it is much more, as I said, sort of vibe coded. Like it's an attempt to displace this idea of excessive legalism, right, onto the actual intent and affairs of the heart of the person, right? The other thing, of course, about Pharisaic Judaism is it's very brutal, right? Like if you disobey the law, the sentence is often death. But because the sentence for so many things is death, they just figure all these loopholes around it. But unless you're of the right sort of social caste, so you got the right amount of money, or you can afford the right kind of like sacrifice, you're just screwed. So the problem with legalism is that it all depends on who interprets the law. And you see this as well with you know what the Noahide laws are? You ever heard of those?
Yep.
Okay, so the current sort of crop of rabbinical Jews that we have at the moment love to talk about the Noahide laws, which, for your listeners, are the laws that all the Gentiles will follow in the coming sort of Jewish state, right? When the Sanhedrin is reconstituted and the whole world is ruled from Jerusalem. This is literally, this is written down. Maimonides was big on this. Now, these rules seem very, very simple. So, for example, the first one is, no idolatry. Thou shalt not worship idols, right? But you've got to think of it in terms of, not to be too blunt, but you've got to be a bit Jewish in your thinking when you think about this, right? Well, what exactly is idolatry? Right? Like, what exactly is moida? Right? Because it's literally like that, right? Because Maimonides, right, had what is known as the strict interpretation of idolatry. And under that interpretation, all Orthodox Christians who venerate the saints, right, or venerate the cross, that's worshiping idols. That's punishable by death, right? The prohibition against murder, what the fuck does that mean, right? If you're a soldier and you go to war and you fight for Israel, is that murder? Well, of course it isn't, right? So these very, very vague principles, when instituted under legalism, just essentially mean whatever you want. And again, to come back to Tim Walls, these words that he's using basically mean whatever he wants them to mean, right? And it winds up all being political language, right? You'll notice that appeal to, this is not who Minnesotans are. All of these, it's one of my least favorite tricks in politics, because it comes up again and again and again and again, right? Because if you are trying to move a group of people towards a certain objective, one of the easiest way to do it is to create an identity for people, right? We Minnesotans, right? We believe in this, right? Which means we don't believe in that, right? And therefore you should all agree with me in this policy. And this is not a new thing. They've been doing this fucking shit since Rome. Okay, right. I'm I'm really spurging out tonight.
No, that's why I had you on, man. I invited you to here to spurg. I do have something I want to say though. And I'm gonna out myself a tiny bit as a millennial, and I apologize to the Zoomers in our audience. All I can think of is freaking Dolores Umbridge when you're talking about this. You remember the scene where they're, Of course, you've seen Harry Potter. Come
Yeah,
on,
of
man.
course. Yeah.
So you remember the scene where they're pinning all the rules on the wall?
Uh-huh.
And like they've got a guy on a 30-foot tall ladder because they have to make more rules.
That's right.
I think like you can picture that when you talk about legalism versus this anti-legalism, not even anti-legalism, but the counter effort against that as breaking some of those rules. At a certain point, in order to be free of this mind slavery, there's something I've heard about Jesus that people say is like he came to deliver captives. And all I can think is when people are stuck in that legalism of, well, is this contradictory, or do I do this or do I do that or whatever, they're mind slaves. And the thing that breaks them free is saying something like, you must break that rule because it wasn't made by God. It was made by a man who wants to control you. And that might sound very revolutionary, but if you're a slave in your mind, which is all I can think about leftists now, like I really do see them basically as some kind of a zombie horde, which is why I referenced the hiss at the beginning of this interview. They are not connected to anything in the natural world. And I think this is why and nowadays, I'm not saying this is true for all times, but nowadays, any pursuit of truth that is grounded in reality inevitably leads you rightward, because the war is apparently on all logic, reason, and physical basis, the physical basis in which we live. And it's perfect for people who have laptop jobs and don't go outside.
Well, what winds up happening under legalism is that as laws proliferate and they become more complicated, the default position essentially becomes you make no real decisions for yourself. Okay. This is the kind of governance that I find most obscene that the UK is rapidly drifting towards, or may already be there. Okay. So the first principle is that unlike the Western classical liberal tradition, right, which is now receding into the past, right, where anything that is not strictly forbidden as illegal is permitted. Okay, right. That's the way it used to operate, right? And when you had highly religiously homogenous and ethnically homogenous societies, most of the time this worked pretty well because there was just like a whole bunch of kind of moral canon and custom, right? So you didn't need a law to say like, don't get like 100 kittens and put them in a trebuchet and vault them off the white cliffs of Dover into the sea, right? You wouldn't need a law against that because everyone would be like, what the fuck, right? And if one person did that, everybody would unanimously agree that dude need to be fucking locked up. Okay. As multiculturalism has encroached, you need more and more rules to cover more and more situations that most people would just not even consider. And this has been sort of like one of the big weaknesses, I think, of sort of whites generally, is that Western liberal societies are predisposed to what's called isonomia, which is Greek for basically the law applies the same to everyone. Now, okay, that is a sort of a pure sort of Platonic concept, and on the ground there are always going to be like differences, right? It's one of those things you can aspire to but never get perfect. Okay, but broadly speaking, okay, this is a fundamental principle. Africans and people from the Middle East and stuff like that generally just they don't believe that, right? They are explicitly tribal, right? So the law is just a thing to advance their tribe. Okay, this is what you're basically seeing in America and the West. These people, they come in and they don't believe that the law applies everywhere to everyone. The law is simply a device to be used to further their own tribe. Now, hang on a second. I had another bit I was trying to go with this. And the second thing is that once this first idea of everything is illegal except the things that are permitted, you wind up in a situation where you have to check with the government for everything. Okay. And I would argue that this actually mirrors Judaism, and also to an extent mirrors Islam. Okay. Um, if you take a shit, you've got to, oh, how's the government gonna feel about that, right? Am I gonna go over my carbon allowance? They want a situation where literally every single thing you do, no matter how minor, you stop and you think to yourself beforehand, is this allowed by the government? Now, that to me personally is an intolerable state. And I would argue that that's sort of what Christianity was trying to get out from under, if that makes sense.
That's a fascinating idea. And I think you're totally right. Because there is, so unless you've been, let me put it to you this way. Most normal people do not run podcasts and do not have spurgouts and rants like we do, right? But behind closed doors.
Although it's kind of weird, because the more creative people get like banished from society, the more people like start podcasts, because it's now become one of the few ways you can like make a living if you have been essentially like outcasted from society,
Absolutely. So not that many people are comfortable speaking their mind, but I'm telling you, when you do it, and when you do it freely and openly and without fear, you're a free person. These rules don't apply to you. Free, the difference, I hate to keep referencing these things. This is another post that I put up. It was that it turns out that the difference between a slave or a bot or whatever you want to call it is courage. You can't say that. Principles, it's free speech, and a sense of humor, it's funny. Right? It turns out that the very virtues that we used to assign to men of stature are the things that make you not a slave. There was a word that I learned a long time ago, not early, but maybe midway through my illustrious podcasting career. And it was an old Norse word, and now it's escaping me. One
of the funny things about laughter, right? Excuse me, is that it's involuntary, right?
Yes.
You can make people laugh, right? You notice this very, very clearly, like, in peak woke, for example, when woke like just completely took over comedy, right? And instead of like these people actually laughing, right, they be listening to some, they, them on stage doing a heckin' wholesome chungus comedy set, right? Where nobody's feelings are going to get hurt, right? And one of the reasons why laughter is so powerful is that everybody recognizes the truth when it is stated, right? Mm-hmm. And the sort of the harsher these truths are, often the bigger the laugh, right? This is why edgy comedy is a thing, and laughter, I think, is a really, really important thing. And look, it does take courage. This is one of the reasons as well why a lot of groups, they heckin' hate the Christians, because the real hardcore OG Christians, they just didn't give an F, man, right? Like they'd be like, oh, if you continue to practice your religion, we're going to torture you. Okay. Yeah. And it's not just the Christians who do this, by the way, right? The Muslims have been known to do this. There's this like story, I forget where it's from. I should probably try and dig it up. A bunch of Muslims get like conquered, and their new despot says, right, if you go to like a mosque, we're going to beat you. So they all go to mosque, they all get like beaten. And then the next week he's like, if you go again, we're going to like cut your fingers off. So they just go again, and like they just start piling up like piles of fingers. And then like the next week they're like, we're going to chop your hands off. And they still like faith is like pretty amazing like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's such an effort to harness an ersatz version of it for political gain, and such an attempt to crack down on it and sort of rigidify it, because faith, I mean, Christian faith in particular is very like sort of personal, right? So one man might be called to God and decide, to make beautiful art or beautiful music, right? Another might be called to God to, I don't know, make a podcast or like, like whatever, right? And it gives you courage. Like it really does. Like one of the problems with being an atheist is that what existential reason do you have really to resist anything, right? Everything becomes like a balance of pleasure versus pain, right? And that's actually a terrible way to live, in my opinion. I mean, I was an atheist for like a lot of my life, and actually, I was a really weird kind of atheist. You see this a lot, where I believed in evil, right, and the devil, but I didn't believe in God, which is a very, very strange thing. You see this in atheists like a lot. Like they believe in evil, but they don't believe in good, right? And it can motivate you, and if enough people start thinking that way, they just become very hard to control. Like you'll just be like, no, we're not doing that, and they're like, well, yeah, we are, right? What are you going to do? What are you going to like? You're going to kill us all? Fucking, good luck with that. And and you get in this cycle. The Zionists in America are trapped in this cycle at the moment, actually, right? And this is a cycle as old as history. Okay, so you want to repress a population. You really want to repress them. You fucking hate them, but you don't want them to know that you want to eliminate them. You don't want them to know that you hate them. Okay, so you make conditions like harder for them. You like work around the edges. You work behind the scenes, right? Things get worse and worse and worse for them. Every single time they complain, you say, oh, it's your fault. It's, it's because of democracy, right? Like you voted for just anything, right? Like just really any possible excuse, right? You light a house on fire and you're like, oh, it was little Timmy who did it. I saw him playing, with a book of matches like last week, and everyone like gets angry at little Timmy, right? But once the mask comes off, right? Like once enough people start realizing, hey, it wasn't little Timmy that set the house on fire, okay? Your options begin to narrow, okay? And you start having to like actually pull out the club. You have to start getting hardcore about it, okay? You like, and this is what we're seeing with quote unquote anti-Semitism in the West. Okay, people are criticizing the Zionists or the Jewish community like more broadly, and they're not willing to countenance that. Okay, and so they're just bringing in more and more and more coercive measures. But the problem is these coercive measures in of themselves create more backlash. It becomes a negative feedback loop, if you know what I'm saying, right? And if you don't relent, and if you just keep riding that train to the end of the station, eventually what you got to do is you got to start locking people up. You got to start killing people. And then it becomes clear to everybody, oh, hey, these guys are like really, really don't like us. They're, imprisoning people. They're like, and that sort of foments revolt. That's sort of the reason why police were invented, weirdly enough, if you want to hear that story. Do you know the story of how police were invented?
No, go ahead.
No. So England was prone to famines for like, quite a fair sort of chunk through like the I think it was like the 16, 17, 1800s, if I'm getting my centuries right. Usually I'm live streaming and I have like a chat. And so like if I get like some fact wrong, I'll just be like chat, right. But now what would basically happen is like crops would fail. There'd be like a sort of a dearth of wheat. They called it corn, actually, back in England, right? There were these things called the corn laws. And the corn laws were basically all these laws to prevent speculation in grain, because grain was like what most people had to live on, okay, right? So if you just enabled the free market, you'd wind up in this situation where whoever had the most money would get all the grain. So like, the people in the cities, and then you have all these like people just starved to death out in the countryside. And that's like not a good, good look, right? And the corn laws meant that you couldn't like move grain to other places and sell it there. There were all these like weird things. Anyway, so what would happen is the grain supply would like run out, and the villagers would go to like the miller, right, the dude who milled the grain into flour. And in like literally the whitest, like this is the most polite, rebellious like shit you can like ever hope for, right? They would rock up and they would basically say to the miller, right, we are setting the price for grain. Okay, this is what everyone could afford. Everyone would bring up their money. Okay, right? They would give the money to the miller, and they would take the grain away. Right? They wouldn't just steal it. They wouldn't set the windmill on fire or any of that kind of stuff. They'd just be like, look, we're setting a price. Okay. Occasionally, these would get like a little bit out of control. Okay, so then what would happen is the lord of the area, okay, would have to send a message to the nearest garrison, right, which might be 3 days away. Okay, oh my god, oh my honor, there's a bit of trouble in Tumbleshire on Tweed. Please send the king's troops. So it takes like what 3 days, a week for the message to get to the nearest city. And then like maybe another week and a half for the soldiers to actually like turn up in Tumbledown on Shire. Okay. And often by the time the soldiers like actually rock up, the situation's cooled down a bit or stuff. But soldiers aren't really designed for civilian pacification, right? So then what would often happen is that the soldiers would get heavy-handed and actually make shit worse, right? They'd beat somebody, or like they'd have to garrison them in people's houses. Everyone would get like pissed off. Some violence would break out. The soldiers would like shoot or like stab somebody. And then before you know it, the entire province is in rebellion. Okay. And this is obviously a subpar thing. So police were invented, right, as a sort of civilian pacification measure, right? They're like semi-soldiers that are like on the ground, and they're supposed to be close to the people, right? And they're like a mediating layer between the population and the lords that have like actual proper military force. Of course, now in cities like London, they're not really close to the people at all. Basically, they've just become a sort of another arm of the state, like without any sort of like feeling of community. I forget where I was going with that.
I love it. I mean, I think that was one of the most interesting asides I've heard. I remember hearing something about the corn laws back in the day and being like, that sounds like a boring story. Turns out it's not. Just like half the things in history. One of the things. Well,
history's like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to actually point out that one of the things that happened to me in studying history and doing a history podcast for as long as I did is I did start that show as an atheist, and I came out of it not an atheist. I understood a lot better what Christianity was for, and I understood a lot more about how evil works. And when you know these stories from history, the types of things that Mr. Fist covers on his show, it can give you a lot of broader context to why it's so important. And it makes people who have genuinely arrived at these things a little bit extra frustrated with types like the dispensationalists. One of the things I realized in researching that was the thing that I rejected when I became an atheist wasn't Christianity. It was dispensationalism and apocalyptic occultism. These are things that have wormed their way into especially American Christianity and have sort of poisoned the well for most people. When you talk about Christianity, they think about the end of the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the straw manning that has happened with Christianity is so intense. I completely agree. So, like, when I was an atheist, all the forms of Christianity that I got exposed to were just insanely tarded. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses, and like, the Unitarians, and it just seemed so ridiculous, right? The thing is, again, it's not like all all the fedora tipping stuff. Like, can God create a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? I don't know. Like, that's completely beside the point. Like, shut the hell up. Like what? Like, why? Checkmate, Christian. Nothing about, or this idea, like you were saying, that the only reason to be a Christian is to either prepare for the apocalypse or so you'll get into heaven. the idea that it might have any positive effect on your life in the here and now is just completely put aside. You get all these like weird, crazy, like the evangelicals, or you get people like fucking like Russell Brand. He gets like baptized as like a Protestant, and then what? Like 2 weeks later, he's got a swimming pool. He's baptizing other people. Oh no!
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
dude, come on. That's not. Oh, Fedora tippers be like, yeah, well, they call themselves Christian. Yeah, well, I could call myself a Bitcoin shitting unicorn, right? It doesn't make me one, right?
yeah, yeah, I know. And to me, and I hope this isn't boring for people to talk about this, but I think it's the most interesting thing in the world. For me, my listeners have heard me say this endlessly, but for me, understanding Christianity came through the old ones, the people who figured it out a long time ago. It started with Aquinas and Anselm and all of this, classical stuff. Then I started to see another view of it through Chesterton, the Inklings, like Charles Williams and George MacDonald and C.S. Lewis, of course. I mean, all of these people gave me a different lens on this thing where I was like, what people are freaking out about and angry at Christianity about, isn't actually Christianity. Christianity is supposed to help organize your thoughts, organize your life. And, like you say, a lot of people think it's just to prepare for the apocalypse or to get you into heaven. They can't even conceive that it's supposed to do something good for you on this plane.
Yeah. And the other thing that you see a lot of, which I call like the Western disease, is this idea that adopting a religion is just a way of framing your thoughts, right? That's basically all it is. Okay. So yes, I will wake up this morning and be a Christian, right? Do you go to church? Well, of course not. No, like I mean, to borrow language from the left, there is a praxis involved. Right, you got to go to church, right? You got to take communion, right? There's like a whole other layer. Just as an aside, I want to tell you the story. Sure. There's this guy I knew. He's dead now. Alan. He hung out in like there's like a dissident house in London. Anyway, he converted to Islam, right? On this basis, right? He was like one of those people who's like. Just it's a very, very white thing to do, right? You just say one day I will decide to be but he never, ever, ever went to a mosque, right? And when he was asked by a friend of mine, right, like, have you ever been to a mosque? He's like, no, I hate brown people. What? But he just really liked the sort of like, I guess like the framing of it and stuff like that. But to him, there was no. This is another thing that sort of like slipped in, this idea of ecumenism, right? All the organized churches are like very, particularly the Catholics and stuff, and the woke Protestants are very, very into. There's really just one God, and all paths lead to Him. Yeah, then explain Satan, right? I mean, clearly, right? Okay, like you can say. Satan is not as powerful as God, is subservient, but he is a disembodied force, right? Is what many people would think of as a entity like that, right? Which means by definition in Christianity, there are at least two paths to stuff. Okay, right? So to say like all paths lead to the same like thing is just, it's bullshit on its face. And all it really does is just continually demean Christianity, right? There's nothing special about your God, right? Really, what's the difference between Jesus Christ and Vishnu, if you think about it? Fuck off. I don't mean to swear, but I
get it.
Mate, I absolutely reject that. We worship the same God. Speak for yourself. Yeah. That is not bloody true.
Well, it's like, doesn't it say in the Bible, wide is the path that leads to destruction? Doesn't that mean that there's a lot of different ways to get there and narrows the path that leads to salvation?
Yep.
And, I don't think it's to go back to legalism. I don't think it's about adopting exactly the right rules and the right doctrines and believing exactly what this theologian said. And if you don't get it right, then you're out. Like, that's not it. But I think that's the balance that, that's the balance that you're supposed to walk. We're over time, but I mean, I don't have anywhere to be. I know I told you 60 to 90 minutes, but that was because one of us was going to get spurgy.
Man, I got nowhere else to be. Like, okay. I can keep going. It's not a problem, man. Like,
Okay, well, as long as you're good, I just want to make sure, because I told Pete, like, I was like, we'll do an hour and that'll be it. And the first time he was like, well, it's dinner time, I gotta go. And the second time he was like, we went over a half an hour. I'm like, are you sure you want to keep going? He's like, oh, right.
No. This is fun. Like, okay. Yeah. I mean, this, and again, to not to sort of belabor this point, but to contrast legalism. Okay. There is no legal system large enough to account for every contingency, right? This is one of the big drawbacks of the law. And, and sort of the classical liberal idea was supposed to get around this problem with things like trial by jury. Okay, so you get like a weird edge case, and the actual decision over whether you did something bad or not is supposed to be decided by a group of your essentially neighbors, right? Like your peers is what that is meant to be, right? Like people from your community, okay, right? So you get hauled into court, you got sprung by the bobbies having carnal relations with a sausage, right? And it's a trial by your peers, right? And all your peers are like, actually in Cornwall, we like a bit of carnal relations with the sausage. There's nothing wrong with it, right? I know that's an episode, but this is my point, right? Like, it allows for sort of variations, right? Because laws are just sort of preset suppositions, whereas reality is heckin' complicated. And you see this is why legalism always results in like a bajillion million laws, because an attempt to vivify some kind of like system that accounts for like every possible outcome just becomes sclerotic and quite simply easy to manipulate. Because when you're in a situation where the laws are so complicated that no normal person can possibly know what they are, in practice, it just becomes whatever a lawyer says it is, or whatever a judge says it is, or whatever a policeman says it is, right? You see this on the streets in the UK like all the time now, right? There'll be some like dude like preaching on the corner or something like that. Some like 5 foot nothing woman policeman with a chip on her shoulder will come up and be like, you've got to stop doing that. It's against the Public Order Act. No, it isn't. It just, but they just take a chance because the number of people who actually have memorized the Public Order Act is vanishingly small. So 9 times out of 10, that totally works. And this is really what it eventually comes down to, is that it's just people enforcing social mores. Now, most of the time, those social mores are good things, but under woke, they've become completely pathological. Oh, and very anti-Christian. But the whole government's like anti-Christian. Like they all these churches in the UK keep like catching fire, and they just don't give a crap, right? If they were synagogues, literally the entire might of the country and the security services and the entire parliament would be bent to figuring out who did it. But it's just Christians, like who cares, right? Whereas Christianity is much more about what is in your heart. Now, that has its downfalls too, right? You have people, they can pretend to be Christians when they aren't, or they can pretend to be virtuous when they aren't. But sooner or later, they will give the game away. It's hard to sort of keep up lies. And one of the best things about Christianity, for me anyway, was just to stop lying, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people are raised in modern society to think that lies are fine, right? They start you off with like little lies, and they're like, oh, really, you should lie to protect people's feelings, and you should lie for this and you should lie for that.
Mm-hmm.
And lies they just breed more lies. You shouldn't lie. I cannot stress this enough. And then if you get used to it eventually, right, like you lose the ability to distinguish between the lie and reality. And now when I have to interact with people who I know lie a lot, I find it basically intolerable. Because I would rather just say nothing. Right. Like, if given a choice between saying nothing and lying, I'll just say nothing. And I think it's very, very important because lies destroy reality, right? It's already hard enough to like figure out what the hell's going on without having a bunch of people around you deliberately distorting the information that they're giving you, if that makes sense.
You gave me a thought here, actually, because just as the word Christianity has been soured by, well, everything we've been talking about, I think the word science has been scoured the same way. Because when you read old science, or what these call, I think they call the natural sciences, or whatever, it's about making observations about creation and trying to figure out how it works, and then not trying to disrespect it or manipulate it necessarily. It's more about understanding how it works and then following the rules. And then you can do amazing things still following the rules. But now science has been swept up as the new sort of cult word of the West, broadly speaking. And we saw that during COVID, and that was super frustrating because, again, a lot of concrete hardened during COVID, and that was one of them where I was just like, we had a little glimmer of a chance to try and save the name of science, but now it just sounds cringe coming out of my mouth to say the word science.
Yeah, because it got folded into legalism, right? What happened was that science became a justifying principle for legalism, right? You gotta, everyone's gonna get locked up. You gotta stay in your home. You gotta take this mystery juice. Why? Science. Shut the hell up, right? And back in the day under Pharisaic Judaism, they would have said, oh, well, Hashem demands it. Well, you can't question Hashem, obviously, right? And it's exactly the same. Like now Fauci's like, you have to trust the science. Don't you trust the science? I am science. It's the funny thing is, if you tried to describe COVID back to someone in like the 1980s, it would have just sounded like one of those weird skits. Like, remember that South Park episode they did where Cartman goes into the future and there are those like otters that, no, it's not the otters. Yeah, they're all atheists and they all praise science. And they praise science. It's the same thing. They can't rely upon religion, but you need some kind of religious framework. This is my basic take on this, right? Everybody has a religion, okay? We as humans are hardwired for it. If you do not pick your own religion, someone else will pick it for you. And usually what they pick for you is simply a way of motivating you towards the goals of their regime. And that's what happened. All the science believers, all the science trusters, they just wound up believing in a religion, because every sort of political framework, every narrative framework that drives action needs some kind of prime mover, right? This is the thing about humans. We're narrative creatures, and every narrative needs a first chapter. Right? Every story needs like a thing where they set it up. Okay. And so when, you can talk about like science, like the 1-page setup for science is things used to be really terrible in the past. Right. And then science burst upon the scene. Right.
Yep.
And now we have digital watches and vaccines and microwaves. I'll tell you another thing about fucking studying history, right? Oh, pardon me. Humans haven't changed at all, right? We love, right, to laugh about this proposition. We are so much more civilized now. So there's people back in the Middle Ages. believing the most insane thing. We haven't changed. Humans haven't changed at all. We are exactly the goddamn same, right? And that's why they, this whole progressive project is always doomed to fail. The new Soviet man, the new Jewish man, all these new men, they always, wind up sort of like thinking that, they can just sort of, kill their way essentially to the perfect, I don't know, the perfect underclass, I guess, because it's never the elites that are forced to, like, the proper elites don't seem to believe this, because if they did, they'd be so lobotomized, they wouldn't really be able to think properly. This is another thing you notice about these people that imbibe these like really, really retarded religions, is it starts messing with their brain. They become unable to just think rationally, because, okay, let's take anti-racism, okay, because anti-racism is sort of one of these. Okay, so you're an anti-racist. Okay, so you believe in the blank slate theory. Okay, everybody on the earth is literally the same. Okay, now since this is clearly untrue, you have to like tweak your reality like continually in order to like make this work, right? Now, you could argue that any conceptual framework, has some differences from reality. Like, obviously, the map is not the territory, and all this kind of like other stuff. But some of these frameworks have a high correspondence to reality, and some of them have a low correspondence to reality, if you follow me here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And believing the ones that have a low correspondence to reality are very, very bad for you, right? Not just for you, but for the society that you're in. If enough people adopt them, you wind up with these like weird things, like these like liberal white women who go to like Burkina Faso, because they want a bit of BBC or whatever, or they're going to like prove to themselves that, in fact, everybody on Earth is in fact as nice as like, the white people that they grew up with, and they wind up like butchered into pieces. Now, this ties into, who the hell was it? There was someone who said this great quote, which was, if they can get you to believe absurdities, they can get you to commit atrocities. And I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Because that seems to sum up COVID for me like really well.
Did you ever read The Old Man and the Bureaucrats?
No. Who's it by?
It's by I think it's Mircea Eliade.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. I just read, I don't know how to pronounce words. But it's about a guy who gets swept up into this system, old guy, of course. And it's a communist system. And he's being interrogated for the crimes he committed. And all he does to answer their questions is tell old stories. And it frustrates them to no end, because it's almost as if he's living in another realm. It's a great read. It's really short. Really good friend of mine recommended it years ago. Hard to find a copy, actually, so you might have to dig through the old Internet Archive to find the good version. But
I'm going to pick that up. That looks really. It's from Romania.
Yeah,
I can totally see that. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Do you ever read Kafka at all?
Long time ago.
Yeah, so the trial is a bit like that. If you want another sort of amazing book about communist interrogations, there's that one, Darkness at Noon, I think it's called. It's about this Communist Party apparatchik who gets on the wrong side of his local, leader or whatever, and winds up, being purged, and, just the mental process he goes through. It's a very, very bad thing when your government gets possessed by ideology, right? Or, some kind of destructive, low reality correspondence ideology, because, they just, I just don't even know. Like, imagine, right, like the woke police, right? Like they drag you in and they're like, do you believe that like men can be women? And you're just like, what the hell are you even asking me?
Right.
Like,
right. Because it's
Sure.
it's not an actual question, it's a check.
Yes.
It's a check on your baseness, so to speak. They want to see if you can answer the question. If you can't, if you stutter or you hesitate, they know you're no good.
Yeah.
And even if you do answer immediately, I mean, it's everyone's read 1984, but at the end of the book, when Winston's being tortured, it's I need you to believe it when you say it. You're just saying it because you want me to hear it, and so you'll stop the torture.
Yep.
Yeah. There's
1984 is amazing, and I wish anyone, if you're listening to this, if you haven't read 1984, read it. Right? Like, I know everyone's like, oh yeah, it's like 1984. It's a bit of a cliche. It is a cliche for a reason. Right? That book is like amazing. Like, every couple of years I reread it and I find more stuff in it. Every single principle of social control, mass communication, government coercion, reality bending is in that book. If you for example, there's this bit where Winston goes to meet Julia on, I think it's like their second date or something like that, right? And he meets her at this rally, right? They're having like a rally for the war, because in 1984 there's always war, right? War eternal, okay? And it comes over the speakers, the loudspeakers, that Oceania, instead of being at war with Eurasia, I always get them confused, is suddenly at war with East Asia, okay, right? So it suddenly changes. And everyone in the crowd like looks around, and they suddenly notice that all the signs and all the banners are wrong, right? Because it says like East Asia instead of Eurasia. And they're like, oh my God, sabotage. Someone must have put up the wrong banners. So they they go around, they start like tearing them down and stamping on them. And when COVID was on, right, and we saw some like really weird mass behavior. So in addition to all the hospital TikToks, right? Like,
yeah.
The NHS was like big on that, and it turns out the hospitals were empty, right? And I know they were empty because I kept getting reports from like actual people who'd go to these hospitals and they'd just be empty, right? They're just totally empty. All the hospitals are fucking empty, okay? And then they did this campaign to clap for the NHS. See, in the UK, they always frame it as our NHS. Right? This is language deliberately designed to think that you, the lowly citizen, right, has a share of ownership in this thing, but you don't really. Okay. And every I think it's on a Thursday at like 6 p.m. Everyone's supposed to like stand outside and clap for the NHS. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and people did it, right? And this was around the time like the Ukraine thing was like kicking off, so people would be bringing their little Ukraine flags out. It's like, oh man.
Lord have mercy on us sinners.
Man.
Man, the same thing happened in Milwaukee and Chicago. I mean, it's like it was I don't know what it is, but it was as if all I could think of was that scene in Dark Souls where they ring the bell and all the zombies stand up. And I was like, holy shit. Because like when it first started, I always tell this scene, and people who've listened to me for a while know this scene. The first day when I figured out that all they were doing was setting up a gigantic movie set, I fell on my bed and I stared at the ceiling, and I think I just started babbling for like half an hour because I was like, I cannot believe they're going to try to do this. And then we started to see the same set dressing appearing in every city. I would drive to Milwaukee, or if I was in Chicago, or, I'm from the Midwest, like welcome to Wisconsin, by the way. I would go everywhere I would go, there would be these little white tents. And it was like, it's a movie set. Like, this is set. I know what this is. Like, I used to work in movies and television. I would try to tell people this, but they would have this story going in their head that I couldn't fight because the narrative pull of it was too strong. And I think that might be a conversation for another time, because I could go on so you got to spurg out. That's the kind of thing I would spurg out on, is how mass communication works and how people, you know what they say? They say it felt like a movie. And they said the same thing.
We should absolutely do something on that. I actually have like an entire theory of governance that's been like bubbling in the back of my head about how we are really governed as opposed to the way they say that we were governed. And I think a lot of it revolves around deliberately making people angry and anxious so that the regime can deliberately provide an acceptable way to relieve those emotions. Because in a democracy, what really counts is the ability to move large groups of people in a certain direction. If you study mass communication, you'd know about this principle.
Oh, yes.
And I think that the way we are actually governed, right? The way the sausage is made is actually very, very gruesome. Yes. Very gruesome indeed. And people, they don't want to believe that they are sausage, but you are.
Yeah.
You're sausage, mate, right? Like, and this is one of the reasons why the elites get like so fucking pissy when you start talking back to them. They're like, you're sausage. Mm-hmm. You're on my plate. You're there to be eaten. How dare you stand up and be like, imagine a sausage, you know, having a nice English breakfast. The sausage stands up and it's like, I've got rights. You can't eat me. You just be like, dude, know your place. You're a sausage. You belong in my belly.
Yeah.
Give me your tax money and shut the hell up.
Yeah, exactly. When we did our series on Gnosticism and mystery religions and occultism and all of that stuff, there was this scene I'll never forget. I was like, yeah, it's like if you were playing a video game and a character suddenly turned to you and just said your name, Mr. Fist. Right?
Oh, mate. That would be so heckin' spooky. Yeah. Holy crap, mate. Oh, I wish you could. Oh, mate. If you could code that in a video. I don't actually play horror video games anymore.
Yeah.
I've had like more than enough of that stuff in my actual life. I really don't need to be like did you ever play that game, The Plague Tale: Innocence? It's like, so I got that game, right? Just when COVID started kicking off, and I played about an hour of it. And I was just like, no, I'm not.
Yep.
I absolutely cannot deal with like running around with like packs of rats chasing me. I'm out.
Yeah. Wow. I've really enjoyed this, man. I'm glad we got to do a little overtime.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure what note to end on. It feels like we went all over the place, which is exactly my favorite kind of thing to do. How about we just do the classic, like, plug your stuff. Where can people find you? And that's it. Where can people find you if they want to hear more from you?
You can find all of my stuff at www.newsfist.net. I'm a bit hard to find on YouTube. If you search for Newsfist on YouTube, you get this Sri Lankan news channel called News First. I don't know. I'm hidden by the algorithm. But on Mondays, I do a podcast called Fistory, which is like history. We covered. I'm doing it the Black Death at the moment. There's just so many weird eyewitness accounts from like the Black Death. So I pick a historical event from medieval Europe and I go back and I just find primary sources and I just read them, right? And people seem to like it. On Tuesdays and Fridays, I do a live stream with Rhetorically Defective, Artie and Fist. I'm also often on Yiz the Unix live stream on Monday, Discordant Dragons. And what else? I think that's it at the moment. I got a pretty packed schedule. Yeah, but find all my stuff, newsfist.net. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, please do. I like to interact with people on Twitter. You can find me at malinformedtv, one word. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for having me on, man. This is really, really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're welcome back anytime.
Do you feel your heart beating faster? Do you hear that creeping laughter? From the weird beyond, things only getting weirder. You don't have to feel like you're the only one. You don't have to be the forgotten child. The joy was always in you. Rome wasn't built in a day. Hold on fast, it's just getting going. 2026 is the final trolling. The Clowntown Chronicle is here for you. The Clowntown Chronicle is